MSFT, por la nostra soluzivi, por la nostra soluzivi, et qui sensua eterni,
This is General Romulus. The NVDA earnings did come out, and that is something. Oh, that is something. NVIDIA is now the most valuable company in the entire world. It is not an upstart. It is not brand new. The company has been around for over 30 years, 35 years perhaps, run by the same gentleman who has been relentlessly driving his company to produce better, more efficient and expensive computer chips. And for a while, all the video game companies 10, 15 years ago were madly in love with these video game chips. Then the Bitcoin and crypto miners got really involved with buying their chips, and that came and went. And then about 3 years ago, with the advent of OpenAI, ChatGPT, and the onslaught of all of the AI bots and engines that are out there, these companies all need huge data centers, which are driven primarily by massive purchases of, that's right, NVIDIA chips. All right. So the earnings are out. We kind of outlined this briefly last week. We said the last 5 quarters or so, the stock had gone down at least a little bit after the earnings came out, and in some cases more than a little bit, more than just a few days, sometimes for several weeks. And now the stock had been pulling back for a couple of weeks prior to the earnings. And again, they came out late last night. And the stock is once again moving up. They beat the estimates on the earnings. They beat the estimates on the revenues. And they also raised the guidance. They said something about their latest and greatest AI chip, that the demand is insane. And they most definitely are having trouble manufacturing enough to keep up with that insatiable demand. So the stock is higher. You look across the AI spectrum, specifically with hardware, chip providers. Broadcom, they're heavily involved in this space. That stock is back up again after pulling back with the rest of the AI, a minor correction since October, late October or so. AMD really jumped up not long ago, but that huge gap right here after they announced that they're having trouble keeping up with the AI demand for their chips. And if you look at the the big scaler, the hyperscalers, Microsoft up today, Amazon up today, Meta, not sure. Meta's been the one that has been the most hurt, I guess, during this AI pullback, this broad-based tech correction. This leads me to believe there's something else going on. Meta is definitely a hyperscaler. They are building massive data centers and getting heavily involved in AI. Anybody that has AI-related work can go over to Meta right now and get incredibly large paychecks, stock options, and all that. Again, though they have been the most hurt, it's got to be related, in my opinion, to something other than, in addition to, the perhaps murky nature of the future payout for all of this AI-related spending that has been going on. NVIDIA is getting money. NVIDIA is making chips and selling chips. They're selling them to Meta. They're selling them to Oracle. They're selling them to all of the big, selling them to Microsoft, these big hyperscaler type companies. These other companies, though, it's still I've been doing this a long time. I've been at this for over 30 years. And I traded through both the dot-com bubble and the subsequent crash. And back then, there was a lot of stuff, they called it clicks and eyeballs, but where was the money? And then later there was vaporware, but where was the money? So NVIDIA's got the money. They did over $50 billion in revenue for the quarter. They made, gobs of cash, margins through the roof on that. The rest of them, though, Microsoft is certainly making money on a lot of products, but in terms of their AI product releases, we see Meta getting hurt, at least partially due to the lack of concrete nature to where is the money going to come from? Where is the revenue? Where is the business going to come from? Are companies all around the world going to pay massive amounts of money for this stuff? Are individuals other than students going to pay massive amounts of money for this stuff? The investment is massive. OpenAI alone has approximately $1 trillion in spending commitments. A lot of that with Oracle and NVDA and a lot of these other providers and ecosystem participants. But where's the money going to come from? And that is still kind of a question mark out there. In the meantime, though, NVIDIA is going up. NVIDIA is going up. The chip sector, the chip group is jumping today. So one of the things I'll look at is the sector itself. We know tech, broadly speaking, even after today's massive jump, is not back to its highs of late October. And if you look at the semiconductor group within the tech sector, it's not back to its highs of late October. And even NVIDIA, after this phenomenal news, the stock is not back to its highs of late October. So it's a very correlated type of a move. And the question now is, do they get back to those highs? And for the risk that investors and traders are taking on these stocks, significantly surpass them within the first few months of 2026. Definitely a question. And the answer, perhaps, is staring us in the face. Now, seasonally speaking, it's November, strongest month of the year. December's also good. January is, above average for sure. So the next 2.5 months should be favorable and put some tailwinds into the stock market, the equities, and in particular the AI-related plays. However, September is typically the worst month by far, and September was incredibly strong. April is the second best month of the year and trailing November only by a very small margin. And this previous April, as you know, with the tariff stuff, was incredibly volatile and, to put it mildly, wild. Well, I'm going to wait. Now, last week in the video I posted, I mentioned that I was doing some buying, and Oracle was one of the stocks I talked about. So got about the lows in here, up a little bit in Oracle. Not going to sell it yet. A little below that low of last week might encourage me to take a small loss on that stock. In addition, we look at the S&P 500. Here's the SPY ETF related to the S&P 500. And we'll go back to the semis in a second. I'd like to say, okay, let's see it clear this hurdle right here, the November 12th hurdle. Let's see it get above there, not even taking out these highs. Let's see it get above there before I believe a real resumption of the uptrend is underway. Because one of the things we talked about last week was this was the first time since the tariff lows that the S&P 500 had crossed below the 50, even touched the 50-day moving average. Now we've had a couple of consecutive closes below it. It's trading above it temporarily right now. We'll see how it closes out the rest of the day. But it was the first time since the April tariff lows that the S&P had even touched the 50-day moving average. In addition to that tasty morsel of information, we have an area that has served as solid support for the market dating back to September. So we're talking over 2 months, several touches here you see. And even after today's run up, the S&P is up about 80 or 90 points going into today's open. Even after that, it's still a little closer to this line than it is the previous all-time highs of a few weeks ago. So it's kind of stuck. Are we in a trading range? Could the correction resume again until it clears this point, November 12th, or crosses below here? Then I'm just going to stay neutral. Slightly more inclined toward the bullish side. Again, seasonality does favor the bulls. Also, the political environment favors the bulls. The global economic environment favors the bulls. So intermediate term, longer term, still somewhat bullish, not crazily enthusiastic, unless and until price climbs above here. Gets below this yellow line, and that will start to curtail my bullishness, at least for the somewhat near term. And so right now, as we're stuck in the middle, I don't plan on doing a whole lot. Again, NVIDIA earnings yesterday, they beat the estimates, they raised the guidance. The entire AI space is pretty giddy about all this. In the meantime, I'm going to hop on my chariot and giddy up back to ancient Rome. And boy, am I excited to talk to you guys again soon. This is General Romulus. Take care.